Alright, we're back at the extension housing. We're going to get the rest of this stuff out. So I reached in, removed this snap ring, and then I'm going to also remove the snap ring that was used to hold in, I guess, everything right here. And then that should come out now. Alright, so the bearing should come out now. Just a little stuck. There we go. So we have this assembly right here with the tubes from the governor. These tubes feed governor pressure. And then we got, so the bearing's actually held in by another snap ring. So let's get in there. There we go. So now the bearing should come out. There it is. Okay, I flipped her over. We're going to take out this seal. Alright, this new seal is actually a different color. I'm using my soft blow hammer. Come on. Let's get it in there straight. There we go. Alright, so we're going to put our bearing back in. I've just dipped it in some transmission fluid. There we go. And then we're going to put the snap ring back in. There we go. Alright, now we're going to put this feed pipe assembly back in, dipping it in transmission fluid. I've cleaned it, by the way, as well as the bearing. So let's see here. There we go. And then we got the snap ring, which will just get it down in there. Alright, next we have the snap ring. This is the one that we expanded to remove this whole overdrive unit. So this one should be pretty easy to go in. There we go. Alright, so we're moving on to all the overdrive stuff. So this is the overdrive piston, and we have two seals on it, and we're just gonna replace these. Let's get our pick in there, pry it out. Lip seal is facing down towards this end with two pegs, so always make note of that. And let's look at this lip seal. This lip seal has seen some better days. It's ripped up over here. So I'm starting to see a pattern here. First we had the overdrive clutches all burnt up, and I think this might even be the culprit. Next we have 3/4 valve, a little bit sticky, and we have this might be the culprit here. for why it was slipping in the high gear is that this seal is just ripped up, torn. Let's check the inner one. Again, lip seal facing towards the two pegs. The inner one's okay, but this outer one is ripped up pretty bad. Alright, we got our new seals. We're going to start with the output shaft, and we have our bearing here. Just put it in some transmission fluid. Let's get some fluid on the inside here. And then we have our snap ring that will hold this in. There we go. Let's lubricate this first, this gear teeth. So it goes in easier. There we go. So I didn't bother taking off the clutch drum from the annulus gear, just because I felt like, I could clean it fine without it, without taking it apart. So this is the annulus gear plus the clutch drum. So we have this snap ring now that goes in to sort of hold this all together. It might actually be this one. Yes, it is this one. There we go. Alright, we have the overrunning clutch and the hub and the bearing. Now, this clutch, this is nice because this only fits on one way. There's actually a shoulder, so this shoulder goes into the little groove on here, and the bearing actually only fits on one way too. It's whatever way sits squarely on the hub. So there's that assembly. Just like before when we were holding the check balls, we're going to use some petroleum jelly here to sort of hold this bearing in place. And again, this stuff will dissolve when the transmission starts running. And we're going to do that because we're going to flip this thing over. Alright, so we need to actually flip this over this way. Well, let's see if I could do it without it. So let's first, most importantly, let's lubricate this. Alright, so the book says to use expanding type snap ring pliers. Now these pliers barely fit in this assembly, so it's probably gonna slip out on me. So let's get it in there, and we're gonna alright, I think I got this. There we go. Alright, I went in. And it's important that you twist this counterclockwise as you're pushing it down, it'll go right in. Alright, next come the planetary gear set. Get some lubrication in there, and we're just going to make sure it's all fully seated. There we we go. Alright, next we got to install the sun gear with the bearing and the plate. I put petroleum jelly underneath this bearing to hold it in place, and then we're going to put that in like this. There we go. Alright, so the overdrive clutch assembly is really confusing, so follow me on this one. First, we have the reaction plate. Now the reaction plate is counterboard. You see that? How the teeth go in? And this hub here has these guys that will catch those teeth. So we're going to put this on like this, facing down. It goes all the way down, and then this part should be flush when you... This should be flush. That's how you know it's on right. Okay, we're going to put this big spring and seat it on the plate here. Alright, so here's the confusing part. You need to... Hold on. There were actually... well, several models of this overdrive unit. And but for our purposes, for this specific car and transmission, there's two. They had the earlier model, and then they had the later model, and you have to make sure you use the right steels. Now, actually the rebuild kit came with the correct steels. They kind of did some of this for you, but what it says is you first need to measure the pressure plate, which is right here, and you measure the shoulder part. You don't measure the whole entire thing. You just measure... Hold on. Come on. Battery. There we go. So you don't measure the whole entire thing. You just measure this part right here. And we get about 220 thousandths roughly. So the next part that tells you the measure is just measure one of the steels, and let's see what we get. And we get about 70 thousandths, 69, but pretty much 70. Calipers aren't super insanely accurate. So let's refer to the manual. So we see here that the first generation design has 215 thousandths shoulder and a 70 thousandths steel. Second generation has an 85 thousandths shoulder. Second generation has an 85 thousandths shoulder and a 55 thousandths steel. So we have the first generation of design here. So now, because of that, we go to this diagram on the next page. If it was the second generation, we would go to this diagram and do the measurements. So then now it's telling us to measure this lug right here. So let's go do that. Alright, so let's take the spring out for now. And let's get in there, measure this, and get about 350 thousandths. Put this back. So now with that information, we look up at this table. If we measure 350 thousandths, we need to have 5 steels and 6 clutches, and that's for the 42RH, so that coincides with what we have, and it coincides with what was in the transmission already. So you need to do that. Make sure you assemble this correctly. But again, you know, the rebuild kit does some of the work for you, but it came with extra steels and clutches in case we got a different lug measurement on that hub. So you need to do all of that. Alright, so after we put the reaction plate on the hub here, we're going to just install our clutches and steels. So clutch goes first, and then we got the steel and clutch. And we're going to make sure this is facing upwards, this shoulder part. There we go. And again, here's the manual for the different transmissions. Ours was this one, so we followed this layout. Alright, so we're going to take this whole assembly and just slide it on here. There. Alright, now at this point I can't continue right now for two different reasons. So the first reason is, regrettably I need to get a special tool. The special tool aligns the sun gear in here with the overrunning clutch way in the bottom, and I can't get away without that, so I'm gonna have to get that special tool. And then I need another special tool, or actually I just need a press. There's a special tool that goes on top of this that you put in the press. I could probably get away without that, but I might actually get it because this is a crazy spring. So I'm gonna need a press. Gotta find a guy that I can use their press. I might just go to the local transmission shop. They've helped me out before. And so this is gonna stay like this for now. But you guys don't have to wait, because in the next scene you'll see the end result and whatever I figured out, and I hope it's good. Okay, so now comes time to press down this big spring in the clutch assembly. So I made this special press setup. You could watch, I made a video of how to build this. It's very simple, so if you want to watch that, click on the link on the screen, and you can take a look at that. So we're just gonna go back and forth and tighten these bolts, and just gonna press this down. Well guys, I got a little bit too excited and started pressing this down without any clutches or steels in it. You have to put the clutches and steels in first. So I'm going to reset, and I'll cut you back to when I get to this part with the clutches and steels in. Also notice I'm taking precautions. This is an 860-pound spring, and I just want to have some face protection just in case anything goes awry. So I'll see you guys when I reset this. Okay, now that we're fully compressed, we're going to put all these clutches and steels in. So I'm being careful here. There we go. Alright, so now we can install the snap ring to hold all this together. This is for the clutches. There we go, make sure it's seated. Alright, and finally we're going to put the snap ring on that holds this center part together. Alright, so we're going to make sure this is fully seated because it is holding a lot of spring pressure, as well as the snap ring for the clutches. So is that fully seated? Yep, looks like it. So now we can back off on these nuts up here and remove the spring pressure. Alright, so we'll just back these off. So I'm not sure if I said it, I've kind of been working on this sporadically the past couple days. This is the special tool that I had to order to align the shafts in the bottom, or the splines in the bottom. So let me take this out. Let me put it on the bench. Damn, this guy's really stuck in here. This is a special tool, so I'm not worried about damaging it too much, and this won't do much. This is hardened steel. But putting this little nail in this hole, and I'm just giving it some taps. Being careful not to hit this, and it's ever so slowly coming out. Take it out now. There we go. So this special tool, there was no pictures of it. I didn't know what it was, but it looks like it's just a dummy version of the output shaft, meaning it's pretty much just the output shaft. And I'm wondering if you could have just used the output shaft for the tool to align it. It might have been hard to get out, because then you would have had to worry about damaging it. This I didn't have to worry, because it's just a special tool. It doesn't do anything. But it's something to think about. You know, because this was about $170. I'm probably just going to resell it on eBay. So this part's done. This was the hardest part. So now we can actually put this in the extension housing. Alright, so we're now ready to put the overdrive unit back together. This bearing was actually in the wrong direction. The groove has to be facing up towards the top, towards the shaft right here. So I just flipped it around. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take the governor body and we're going to reinstall it onto the shaft. Now, if you recall that this is connected, or this is attached to the shaft via this keyway right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some Vaseline. I've got some Vaseline here, and I'm just going to put some on this keyway. That way it doesn't fall out. And then there's the key. This is the keyway. This is the key. I always do that. So we're just gonna get it in there. Alright, so I'm gonna put the governor on and make sure this key stays in place. And we're just going to reach through, and guide it up. There we go. And now we can put the weight assembly in. Let's lube it up a little bit first. Okay, I flipped her around. We're going to put the little valve in after we lube it up. Goes in this way. Lube it up a bit more. And then we have this rod. It's going to go in through the back here. Alright, see if we can get this E-clip on. Okay, I got it on. I got it partly on with my finger this way, and then I just wedged the screwdriver between the wall and the E-clip and just twisted it until it was on. Now it's very important you make sure all these E-clips are seated all the way. At first it wasn't, and I went back and I just checked, and then it snapped into place. If you don't check, they'll fall off and the transmission won't work because you'll have no governor pressure. Then we have this washer. Goes right there. And we're just going to put this snap ring in. Alright, so the last thing is to just put this snap ring on to hold everything in place. Make sure it's seated. Alright, so I don't know if you could see this, but the E-clip here has a flat side, and then this side, which is a little, it's rounded. The rounded side has to be facing out, otherwise the E-clips could fail. So the book says to tighten these governor bolts to 8 foot-pounds. Now the problem is, there's not enough clearance right here to get a torque wrench there. So I don't know how they want me to tighten this, but I'm just going to do it by hand and just... You really shouldn't do this. You really shouldn't torque things by hand. But I got to get this transmission done, and I think this will be good enough. I think this will be okay. So it's really not a very high torque at all, 8 foot-pounds. So I'm just gonna go by feel. Alright, moving on. Okay, so this is the tricky part because the book calls for a special tool to hold the gear train, so I think I can get away with that. First thing I'm going to do is make sure these scarf cut seals are meshing with each other correctly. Then I'm going to offset them. I'm not sure if that does anything, but I like to do it. You know, kind of like piston rings. And I also put some Vaseline on the rings, both as lubricant and to hold them closed when I put it in the case. A little more. So now, I'm just going to take the case and we're going to flip her upside down. I lubed the inside of the case with transmission fluid. Tricky. Might have to do it sideways. Well, this is the reason why I wasn't going in. One of the sealing rings came loose and it got smushed. So I gotta order another one. I'm just gonna order a bunch of these because this sucks. This always sucks when this happens because now I'm so close to finishing. I could finish the transmission right now if this didn't happen. But, you know, life goes on, so shit happens. At any rate, I figured out a good way to hold that snap ring open. I put my snapping pliers in there, and it turns out those are long enough. And I just expanded it fully, and then I tightened the screw, and it's staying opened. And actually, let me bring you guys over. You see how it's opened. So now when I slide the case on, it should go right in. So I'm going to order some of these seals, and then I guess I'll finish the transmission then. This is about a week later. I got the new sealing ring kit, but it came with the metal ones, so I just replaced the 2 Teflon ones. So now I have all metal. So I actually kind of like these ones better, at least for this application. So I have this assembly on some blocks of wood to hold it up so I can put the housing on it. And I got the housing snap ring open with these snapping pliers, and you can lock these if you turn the screw there. So this should be a matter. First I'm going to lube. Just going to lube all this stuff up. So now take this and just carefully put this through. I'm not going to push it in. There we go. Alright, so Now I can release these snap ring pliers, and I can see the groove in the bearing, and then close the snap ring. There we go. So you just move it. Make sure that's seated in there. And now, when I remove this, it should not fall out. Yep. So we're good to go. Alright, so now we're ready to put in the clutches and steels. But before we do that, we're going to put in these two snap rings. So first is the straight snap ring. When you hold it to the side, it's just straight. So we're going to put that in on the bottom groove there. Next we have the wavy snap ring. This goes in the same groove as the straight snap ring. Just goes right on top of it. And now we're going to install the clutches and steels. So first we have the reaction plate. We're going to slide in there. And then we're just going to put clutch and steel in, alternating. And then after all that, we have the pressure plate. Okay, so we need to make measurements on the Overdrive unit to figure out what size spacers we need to have. So what I've done is, so there are two measurements you need to make. The first measurement is for the intermediate shaft spacer, and that is on the intermediate shaft right over here. There's a spacer that goes on it, and it's kind of like a snap ring, and it has a certain amount of thickness to it. So that's the first measurement we need to make. And the second measurement is for the Overdrive piston thrust plate, and that we need to that measurement's for, I don't know if you remember, the Overdrive piston had a spacer on it right here. So we measured for those. So I've done this already, but I'll show you how I did it. So to measure for the intermediate shaft spacer, you need a special tool. Now for me, I have a lathe upstairs, and I was able to turn this, make this on the lathe. I did shoot video of that, but I was having camera issues and other issues, and ultimately I decided it wouldn't make a good video. So I'm sorry I couldn't show how I turned this, but you know, it has a little knurl at the top so you can grab it, and it's exactly the right diameter to fit through here and also down in the bushing. You see how here's it, this is it on top of the bushing, and then it drops down. So, and it's exactly, well, it's supposed to be exactly 5.5 inches, but I made it 10 thousandths smaller than that. Not intentionally, but I had to take that into account for my measurements. So the way you do this is put your special tool in, and then there is another special tool you need to get that's just a flat bar that goes over top of it. Now I just used a piece of aluminum stock. The problem with this is that this isn't a machine surface, so the surface is going to vary a few thousandths along the stock here. So what I did was I just picked the spot that I would do my measurements on, and did lots of measurements, 2, 3 or 4 measurements, and then took an average. So what you have to do is you put this over it, and you take your calipers and you set it on the stock nice and flat. The special tool has a slot in it, so you could mill that if you have the capabilities. And then you just put it down until it touches, and then take your reading like that. Again, I did that 3 or 4 times, took an average, and that gave me my final result. Now with that information, this is the tricky part, okay? After you get that measurement, the special tool, this bar, is a 1/2 inch thick. And thank you, internet, for allowing me to look this stuff up so I can make these tools and not having to buy them, because it would have been about 300 bucks, right? So this special tool is normally 1/2 inch thick. So all the measurements in the service manual are in reference to this being 1/2 inch. So since your calipers are on top of it, we have to take that into account. So what I did is I took that measurement, subtracted this thickness, and that's why I only took it in one spot, because the thickness varies a few thousandths along this. And then I added a 1/2 inch, because that's how thick the actual tool is. So I did that 3 or 4 times, got an average, and I wrote the average down somewhere. It was 0.7833. So then you look at your manual, and this is where we fall. 0.7676 to 0.7855. We fall in here because we had 0.7833, which means we need a spacer thickness of between 193 and 194 thousandths. So these are 4 different choices. So I went to the dealer and got my spacer. So let's measure it here. And it is 194 thousandths. So we're going to put this on next, and then I'll explain the other measurement you have to do. So this is where that spacer goes. I took the other one off already. So we're going to there we go. Alright. So there is our spacer on the shaft. Alright, so for the next measurement, you remove your tool that goes in to the overdrive unit, and then you just put this flat bar down, and then you take your calipers again and you put it on the bar nice and flat, and you go all the way down until you hit this this surface here where this bearing thrust plate seats on. And then once again took that measurement, subtracted the thickness of this tool, and then added a 1/2 inch, and did that 3 or 4 times, took an average, because again you should always repeat your measurements, especially with stuff like this. And I got a value of 1.835. so you look at your manual, and we're in this range, so we get a spacer thickness between 183 and 185 thousandths. Here's our new spacer. We measure it, and we get, let's see here, so I gotta re-zero out my caliper. 180, can you see that? 3.5. So this is our new spacer. So this goes on the piston right here, it goes right there, and then on top of it the bearing goes on it.